Okay, today's lesson is going to be about the very basics of drawing, and that is the analysis of the cube, the sphere, and the cylinder. These are your three best friends in drawing. So we're going to look at not how to draw them, but why we're drawing them, what they look like, what we can understand from their three-dimensionality, what their two-dimensional grandparents are, if you will, their antecedents, and then how we can apply them in drawing in the future. And we're going to look at cross contour line, and a little bit of weight and thickness of line, so that as we move forward in the basics series of our lessons, you'll be equipped with the right proper mental conceptual framework as you start to draw more difficult, complex compositions and still lifes and setups and arrangements. Okay, so it's very basic, but a very important first step in becoming an accomplished draftsperson. Okay, all right, I'll see you in just a second. Stay tuned. Bye-bye. All right, so let's start out discussing and talking about the cube, the sphere, and the cylinder, and why they're important. Okay, so the reason why they're important is that they are the, if you will, the building blocks to every single thing that you want to draw representationally or realistically, if you want to use that terminology, in the natural world, but also from your imagination. And if you like using photographic reference, it's going to make those drawings better. So it's a combination of all those things that can be enriched and enhanced by understanding the nature between, the difference between 2D and 3D. So for all you youngsters out there, or all you folks that are young at heart out there as well, and in all various ages and stages in between, this is the very basics of the beginning to learn to draw better and to draw with more purpose and more polish, right, and professionalization. So let's take a look at these forms and let's see where we get these forms from. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about and demonstrate a little bit. And by the way, today I'm going to draw in different materials. I'm going to draw big for a while, then we're going to switch it up, draw smaller and draw different materials and do different little procedures to show you different ranges of drawing and drawing materials. And also, by the way, be careful of anybody or any school of thought that tells you how to draw something. I think that there are a multitude of ways to draw anything, both representationally and abstract in all areas in between there, and conceptually. So what I train my students to be is to be very open and broad to different approaches and take bits and pieces of all of them and apply them to how they want to draw. Okay, so be careful of that, be mindful of that. So the first shape we're going to look at is the circle. So the circle is that perfect three-dimensional form. Notice how I draw it. Now I'm drawing with the palm method, and I'm taking a very loose approach to drawing the circle. And I'm going to tighten it up a little bit. So I'll label it the circle. Everybody knows that. You know that from the time you're a very young child, right? You got that. It's not a problem. But drawing the circle can be difficult. So as you're drawing it, you want to begin to think about all pies are equal. So do a lot of practice of this, meaning that draw a lot of circles and see if you can make all four parts of that division relatively equal. Don't worry about if you get it lopsided sometimes, or it's got like a growth on one side of your circle. Just practice a lot and it gets better. I've done hundreds, thousands of circles to draw a circle pretty well and pretty easily. So that's our first grandparent to our more complex forms. And these are all 2D. All right, they're two-dimensional. Okay, they're flat. 2D and flat. So the next shape we'll look at that will transform will be the square, meaning that all sides are equal to one another. Okay, so we've got the square here. All right. And of course, you could do that with the ruler, but I'd like you to freehand it as much as you can, and we'll do some with the ruler too as well. So all these sides are equal, and they're straight vertical, meaning that they're parallel to the left and to the right picture plane, but also to the top and to the bottom picture plane. And so another way to check yourself the best you can is, are all four sides relatively equal? So that's our square, okay? So it's flat, it's just as the circle's flat, that's the square. We all know those forms from, pre-kindergarten, right? So those of you that are 11, 12, 13, or younger, or young at heart, you know all these shapes. But drawing them is a little bit different, a little harder. Okay, and then the last shape I want to look at for now is the rectangle, and I'm going to put the rectangle here. So, like the square, we start out with that horizontal straight line, and then I'm going to bring down some verticals here and here. Notice I sketched out loose. So if you get your line way out here, that's okay. Tighten it up and reconfigure it. Correct as you go. And then I'm going to bring down the bottom. Tighten up my line through here and through here. So there's my rectangular shape, my 2D shape. So that's my rectangle. Right there. Okay, so we know those shapes. Those are even more simple elements that we work with. Shape is an element. A form is an element. So let's take these shapes, all right, and let's turn them into more complex forms. So let's take the circle and let's turn this now into a ball or a sphere. So with drawing the sphere, it's just like drawing the circle. Okay? And we're really not going to talk about light that much, even though I might use a little shading. We'll get in that idea range at a later time. So when I draw the sphere, I feel my way through it, and I tighten up where it feels all along, it feels irregular, it doesn't feel correct. And I do that by judging it, by stepping back and looking, and by judging, and trying to just practice as much as you can. So the biggest difference now is that we want to stop thinking about flatness all the way across, okay? And we want to start thinking about roundness and volume and three-dimensionality. Go for the 3D. So we want to start thinking about this idea, turning around and coming back over. We want to think about it moving across like a globe. So everybody knows what a globe is, the Earth or the Moon or Mars now, or Saturn, the rings of Saturn. We want to start thinking about this idea as we move across a form. This is a big jump in your thinking. And if you like comic books, or if you like anime, you like animation, these are the building blocks of that field. So be careful also out there of style. If you're a kid, if you're a youngster and you like anime and you like comic books, if you're copying a style, fine, but it's better to draw volumes and solids, and it's better to draw these elements before you get all mixed up into style. Style can be misleading. And so what I'm showing you now is this idea of cross contouring around a form. So look at the difference between flat here, flat across, a flat shape. No matter which way we go, I can go up and down with it. So that's a flat movement. It's a vector, right? It's just two-dimensional. It takes into the horizontal and the vertical. But here, with the sphere, we take on the 3D. We take on depth and dimension. Dimensionality. So very, very important. So I'm going to throw this ball now and give it a little bit of a shadow here. Okay? Put it on the ground. And maybe I'll throw a little form line on it so you can see it too as well. Right in through here. Okay, without knowing a lot about light and value and edges right now, you may or may not. But look how we can start to make that dimensional. So the difference between the 3D and the 2D, the round versus the flat, is so very important. I can keep coming around with my line work. Coming around, going darker maybe on the edges as it turns, and lighter in the middle with where I have that line, and they can turn around and go back over, and we can think about the backside, because now we have a backside of our form, not just a flat chip, but now we have a three-dimensional ball that we can start to understand and start to manipulate and work on. Okay? All right, so let's go on to the square. So from the square, what do we get? Well, we get the basic cube form. Okay? We go from the square to the box. And so now, and we're not even talking about perspective. Some of you probably know about perspective. I bet you know a lot about it. And so we're not necessarily talking about that yet. We're going from the box form here. Okay, all sides are equal, all sides are parallel. And then we're going to say, let's see this box when it's around our eye level. Okay, so maybe our eye level is right in through there, where that line coming across is. That means we won't necessarily see the top or the bottom, but we are going to see depth, dimension, three-dimensionality, which is what we want to start to practice now. Okay? And so now we start to feel this, and we start to feel this going back into space. Look at that. All right, so we're moving the side now, seeing the right side of the box back into dimension in space. Pretty exciting idea. Here we don't. We just see a series of flatness. It just stays flat. 2D. There's nothing wrong with drawing flat too, by the way. But we want to be, I want you to be, my students in YouTube land, we want you to be versatile. And so we'll talk about the 3D, which is harder, for sure. Nothing is easy in art. So now what I can say is, let's end our box here. Look at that. And so now we have depth and dimension. We still have that front plane, right, moving across, horizontal. But now we have, watch this, if we cross contour, we have this plane moving back in space. Look at that, from there to there. Look how we can feel that force and movement by drawing cross contour lines. You can draw as many as you want. And look at that depth and dimension. Now I can throw a little bit of shadow tone on it. And look how we have now even more feeling of roundness. Very important concept to getting to 3D. So we went from the 2D and now we just went to 3D. 3 dimensions. You can pick it up. You can make it feel like you can pick it right up off the piece of paper, which by the way is pretty flat. Okay, it does have a thickness. Here's a thickness behind the easel. I've got a drawing board up here. It's a little thickness, but for the most part with our piece of paper, our papers, we still think of them as flat. Even though they're technically not necessarily, they've got a little thickness on the side, but there's still a flat surface, by and large. And so now we have created for ourselves the illusion, right, of roundness, of volume, in dimension. So for you parents out there that may be watching along with your youngster, your children, practice it. Practice it all the time. Just practice a circle, a square, a rectangle, a sphere, a box, and then we're going to talk about the cylinder. Do that over and over from now until your maturity, and you will be served really well in terms of your understanding of the model, the figure. If you want to draw dragons, if you want to draw Japanese anime, it doesn't matter what you're excited about. If you want to draw flowers, if you want to draw like Degas or Vermeer or Rembrandt or Rubens, this is all where everybody started. So now look at that. See, I could throw a little background tone on the other side, and look how I can make my box really start to pop out. So that's another term artists use, is we'll call that pop. P-O-P, pop, bang, wow. It's pop out, like you're emerging from the page, like a jack in a box, boom, and you become three-dimensional. Okay. Let's take now the rectangle and let's make it into something a little bit more powerful, and that is the cylinder. Let's take a look at the cylinder. That's another important form to draw. So we can start out with the cylinder, drawing it the same way we did with the rectangle. Okay, so we bring down our bottom, right angles here, there's a right angle there, 90-degree angle, okay? Later on that can change. So there's the basis of our cylinder right there, which was the rectangle. But now let's introduce another concept. Let's introduce the concept of the ellipse. I'll put it over here. The ellipse. Okay? Not a lip or lips, but the ellipse. This idea of what used to be a circle, but now we look at the circle from depth and dimension, different eye level, and now we have a curve to our forms. Now we have, well, that's a cylinder. And we use this guy here, or this girl here. We use the ellipse. So how do you do that? Well, you need to draw a lot, practice, but if we put the top on our rectangle or our can, okay, whatever your favorite soup is, or your favorite canned product, if you still eat from a can, I suppose, we put the ellipse on there. So now we have, look at that, the ellipse to work with. And getting these right is a little tricky, and we're going to talk about that further, and we'll do a section just on the ellipse too, to see more about what's going on with that. So now I'll go back and reconnect the sides of our rectangle, and we'll bring down the bottom of the ellipse. So I like to leave this line that tells me about where I need to go here, in here. We'll bring our curve By the way, this curve on the bottom is always going to be a little bit more curved, just slightly more than the top. Why? Because we're looking down on this area more so than this area. Your eye is closer to that ellipse or that top than it is the bottom. Okay, so we have the bottom of the ellipse here. Curve that nice and curved in through here, and then we're going to bring the other side as if we can see through it, like it's a glass of water. Bring the other side of the ellipse over, and look at that. You've got the back side of the ellipse here, even though you don't see it here, because we're seeing the top of the can here, of the cylinder here. I'll put a little shading on it. You can do that with me. And here we're looking through, okay? So now we can feel, again, this. What does that remind you of? Where have you done this before? Well, you did it with the sphere. So you have another rounded object. So we went from that flat vector, two-dimensional, horizontal, vertical kind of feeling, right? To, again, this 3D rounded feeling. Round it out. Keep it round. Keep it going. And you can cross contour by running your line across. Look at that cross contour. So we feel, and it's the idea in art is to start to feel it. Know it intellectually, but also there's this idea of emotion and feeling, and also feeling form. Feeling the 3D. Reading the 3D component, and look at that. Look how that turns, and it gives you that nice idea. Now I could put a little shading over here if I wanted to. I could go in either direction and shade it. I could throw a little cast shadow here. And there you go. You get 3D quality that we, as artists and designers and sculptors and professionals and beginners and intermediate and wherever you're at, yearn for. Yearn for the next step in our development. So we spent a lot of civilization just dealing with the flatness. And then the Greeks came along, Romans came along, gave us some roundness. Then we lost it a little bit in the Middle Ages, in the Gothic era. And later on, we rediscovered this in the early Renaissance and used these powerful, expressive, new 3D tools to explode our understanding and our concepts of space and dimension and form, with light, with value, with edges, with perspective, in our understanding of anatomy. And we exploded, humanity moved the course of art understanding beyond what we had accomplished and lost, but we moved it further. And by the way, we're still using this today, along with a lot of other exciting concepts as well. Okay, so the trick in drawing is to understand that we're using both the 2D and the 3D. So what you want to, if you're young at drawing out there, is that we're not losing the 2D, we're just gaining the 3D. We're adding to the complexity, because the real trick of it is that you're using both. Your mind switches back and forth from the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional very, very quickly. Okay? It's a very quick process, and the more you draw, the more you understand it. Some of you probably already intuitively understand it. But stopping and being cognizant and consciously aware of what your brain is doing visually and how you get form and dimension. It's a pretty important process. Okay, so that's the first step. What I want to do now is go on to different viewpoints, different materials, and let's just go a little bit further. Let's explore faster. And what we'll do is we'll explore different viewpoints of the sphere, the cube, and the cylinder, and we'll look at the cone and maybe some other forms that we'll just kind of explore and make up, and we'll just see what happens, okay? So stay tuned, I'll be back, and we'll do some more drawing together, okay? Okay, let's get started. So I want to show you my setup a little bit before I kind of pull in. Sometimes you can't see that. And the reason why is I think it's important how you set up your drawing and your drawing board. So I've got a drawing board here. It's about 19 or 20 inches by 24 inches. And what I do is I tape down my edges, and you can use all kinds of different tapes. I just like the Alvin drafting dots. Here you'll probably see them quite a bit, and I tape them to just the corners of my paper. So there's really no need to tape your entire edge or your entire border. I think you're just going to waste tape unless you're masking off something for some kind of effect, which you can do later on, maybe with a more specialty paper. But for now, just, if you will, not mask off, but just tape down the corners. And also, I've got about 4 or 5 or 6 sheets of paper underneath, so I never draw right on top of the wood of my drawing board. You might ask me, well, okay, Mark, why? Well, the reason is the wood naturally it's as hard as my head, and meaning that it is naturally very, very hard, and so it's hard to get soft gradated value edges and switches. So I'm going to bring this drawing board up closer to you. You can see that this has a metal edge to it, which is really nice. So this drawing board is hollow on the inside. The wood is hollow, and it's got cardboard slats in between about the inch thickness of it, which makes it very light. So when you're traveling out and about, you can carry your drawing board with you, and it's not such a cumbersome process. So if you use, say for instance, 3/4 inch plywood, boy, that's really heavy. And so I tell my students here at the university and beyond is to be good to yourself, be easy on yourself, and use something that's lighter. Now you can use foam core, rigid foam core would be fine. You can use masonite, which is fine. I just prefer these because they have a metal edge to the side, and then also they're just super, super light. Now lastly, I also put a little door handle on that, so I can carry these wherever I want, and you can look really stylish walking across campus. I don't know about stylish, but I do know that they're nice and effective. So just a door handle from your local hardware store, a couple of screws, screw it right into the side, and you can carry it nice and clean, and I think a lot easier than trying to put it under your arm, especially if you're smaller like me, or if you're a youngster, and so I think that's harder too as well. Okay, so that's that. I don't like clips on the side when I'm drawing. You run into a big clip sometimes. I do that when I'm projecting on an easel, just for now, because it's quicker and easier to change paper. When I do long-term stuff for myself, I don't generally ever have obstructions in my way. Okay, so let's zoom in here now a little bit, and let's talk a little bit deeper about spheres. Let's start out with the fearless sphere and how that is super cool, I think, and super, super duper important. So, a lot of times students will say, gosh, how did he whip out that circle so easy? Well, one of the things is, when I'm drawing, is notice how I'm moving my arm, my hand and my arm, my wrist around. I'm not drawing a single thing. I'm getting a feel for what I want to do with it. And then I start to move it around. And so, by the way, I'm using an ink micron pen, the Coptic pen. I think it's the Sanguine. And see how I'm feeling my way through the sphere, okay? And I make my mistakes, and I keep on drawing through it. And so, don't even worry about it. I use multiple lines, light lines. I keep a light touch, and there I've got a pretty good circle already to get to the idea of my sphere. And I could do some smaller, could do some over here. The trick is get yourself a sketchbook, get yourself a bunch of sketch pads, drawing paper, notebook paper, newsprint paper, or both, it really doesn't matter, and draw the dickens out of these. That means just draw, and practice these forms. Practice them in various sizes. Notice that we don't really have a direction for any of them. So no matter if they're coming towards us or coming away from us, the circle kind of looks the same, but also the sphere. So let's change these circles now into spherical form. So I can make almost an elliptical half of this, as if it was filled with water. So I can begin to, by throwing an ellipse here in the middle, show my viewer that, hey, this has got a depth and dimension. Here's the back part of the wall, the sphere back here where it touches. Here's the front wall where it touches the ellipse here. Okay, I could do it more at the top, up here, where you can see it. So we're starting to train our brain to think about the circle now as a spherical component. See that? So I can begin to shade these. It's like we're taking a slice out of it, or it's like water in a fishbowl. And I can put together some hatching contour lines, and we can start to say this is a round form. We want you to believe that this is round. So we've got the cross contouring here, up and around, and then down and through and around. And as they get closer to the edges, okay? And so I've got a projection up that's much more greater technical. That's been cleaned up, computer drawn, CAD driven. So it's like the model of perfection. It's almost like it's too perfect. It's not sketchy. I like things at times, not always. There's exceptions to that rule. But I like things that are sketchy too. It's that human touch that gives them that lively quality of roundness, but it gives you that energy as you draw. So you can see I'm drawing the circle here. You can draw another circle. Let me put this top back on cleanly. There we go. Another circle smaller here if you want. Okay, and let's change them all into spheres. So a lot of times if I'm setting the sphere down on a surface, maybe like a table, maybe there's a table angle over here, I'll darken in the line where it touches. Anywhere where you have a form touching a surface, here, like these are all touching maybe their own little tables that they're sitting on. Maybe they're all sitting on a table like this. So maybe it's coming at a diagonal and an angle, and I'll put the angle of the table this way, like so. This has a different table. Wherever they sit down on the surface, and it touches a very fine little point of it, that's where we would get a darker, thicker line. Okay, and so they're sitting right in that area. And I can throw a little light and shadow. Let's say my light source is coming from this direction, up here, onto the sphere. I can throw a little light here if I want. A little form shadow, a little cast shadow from the sphere. It's kind of an ellipse. Starts where the cast shadow starts where the touch of the sphere hits the table and moves outward. Depending on the light source, it can change its shape. And so we'll give a little light cast shadow there, and we'll give a little form shadow here to the right side of our sphere, and I can use some contouring directional lines to make that feel a little rounder. Okay, getting through here. And already we've got the 3D, a little highlight kind of area lips can be through there, and I can put a little bit of extra cross contouring line here, darken that, and make a little core shadow out of that, and to sit that object down onto the surface of our imaginary white table. So here I'll put a cast shadow on the other side, and I'll say the light source will come in this direction. I'll use these arrows to say which way I want the light source to come. So that means that on our fishbowl, we might have a form shadow. So a form shadow is a shadow that is made by the actual light on the form itself, and it takes on the curvature of the natural form, or if it's blocky, it takes on a more angular form as well. But we'll get into that deeper in light and value. So I'll just shade down with some hatch lines, the form shadow. And I'm taking, great pains to kind of move, see how it moves down in this direction? It's a good sketching technique to keep them moving and trying to say that they're turning kind of in this way underneath, opposite a little bit, or in a different direction than these contour lines. Okay, these are cross contour lines. These are shaded hatching lines, but they also have, if I kept going, a cross contour feel in a different direction. And the reason why is that our ball, or our globe, it can be cross contoured from many different directions. It can be cross contoured right in this direction if we wanted. And I could even take it downward like so. And as we get closer to the middle, it gets almost just straight. Even though I never like to, technically this line here could be straight. I always like to give it a little bit of a curve just to make it even more three-dimensional, give you that quality of it. Or the tilt could be, the axis could be here, if you will, and so your cross contouring lines could come in this direction. All points are valid, right, because of the 360-degree nature of the sphere itself when drawing the sphere. So it's like, oh my gosh, that's really technical. What you really want to make sure you're doing is changing the circle from the 2D to the three-dimensional, okay? You're drawing that 2D circle, boom, light, loose, fresh, keep it clean. Don't worry about if you're drawing and it looks like this in the beginning. It's like, whoa, what is that? That's kind of a beat up head. Don't worry about it. Adjust it. Draw light, loose. Don't worry about erasing in the beginning. Maybe you need to draw in pen or ballpoint pen. Don't worry about it. Make your mistakes. Make your 100 hours of mistakes. When I was in art school, in basic foundations design class, I had to take a newsprint pad of 100 sheets, and we had to put 2-inch lines across our paper all the way from left to right, okay? And then we had to put a perfect, or what we thought we were drawing, perfect circle on the bottom. It touches on the bottom. We had to leave, I forget how much space we had to leave in between. Okay, and so we had to do that on the front side of the newsprint and on the back side of the newsprint. I don't know how many circles we had to draw on each side. I'm saying probably 40 or 50 times 2. Let's say 100 times 100 sheets, where we had to draw 1,000 or so circles as well as we could. And so the point of that little discussion was, the more you do, the better you get at drawing the circle and consequently the sphere. Okay, so the ball, if I turned it around, let's say this way, So this is curving and going underneath, right? This is coming back towards us. My arrows try to tell us that story. You can see inside and coming back over. Feel that direction. And so a lot of times you'll see in cross contouring it gets darker as it goes away, lighter. So if the light source was here, this would be a lighter area. Okay, you with me? And then it gets darker as it moves away. Maybe it gets dark right as it comes underneath, but right in through here, it gets so light that it's broken apart, or the line is broken apart and separated, that we don't even need a line anymore. We just let it break. And then it's so dark away from us that it gets a really thick line. And so this whole idea, this wonderful cross contouring, which can take this kind of approach to it. So if I came back across in this direction, maybe this would start to almost right here flatten out. Okay, and I could start the other way over here and come across and tell us that that's rounder. So, you know, the baseball, the basketball, even the football kind of shape, which gets into slight kind of a modified two cones, squished together, can tell us a story about their roundness by the type of lines that are carved onto the surface of the object. So, spatially, out in outer space, what's the most simple form we have in the universe? Well, it's the planets, right? So you have the big sun, and then you have Mercury, and you have Venus, and you have the Earth, Mars, right? And then all of a sudden Jupiter, and then Saturn, one of probably everybody's favorites with those great rings, tends to mimic that, and then Uranus, and then Neptune and Uranus, I forget. And then, of course, Pluto, which I don't think is a planet anymore, which is sad. And then all the other objects out there. All the stars, the suns are rounded. So gravity pushes down on a form from 360 degrees and squashes that material into a compressed ball, right? 3D kind of ball. So the roundness that you're getting helps by thinking in the round, but using cross contour, okay, and also light or shading or value, which is light and dark, right, and also edges, which we'll get into at a later time. So practice this component. Practice drawing the circle, okay, religiously, over and over again. And the more you do, you'll get faster. And what is the circle? The circle is a two-dimensional shaped product. Remember, it's flat across, flat. Okay, look at the difference between the cross contouring and the hatching between these two. It tells you a very different story, doesn't it? Very different. And so we have the 2D, and then we move again to the three-dimensional. So we can break these apart. So I could break this apart into kind of a little eggshell type form up and through here. And so we can start to not draw the sphere anymore. We can draw its half. And that gives us a three-dimensional story. Like we shaved it, we cut it in half. So I'm drawing the ellipse, and I'm drawing the arc of the back part of the sphere right in through there. And then we can shave this, or shade it, shave it, both. I tend to think of it comes with some cross contour, hatching lines in through there, and all of a sudden we get a very three-dimensional looking half spherical kind of form based on what we saw here. So if I take this and go a little bit further, I can put some more shading here, which is called a coarse shadow, the darkest part of your shadow. We'll get deeper into that a little later. So I can make this darker. Now, I'm trying to soften up this movement of light too, with a very scratchy, hatched-oriented kind of drawing utensil, right? Okay. Pulling that out. And then we could also come to see, here's kind of the polar top through here. Okay, there's north, I suppose. And we could see this back side now. If we come through and keep drawing right here, here's the fattest outer backside part right in through there. So the trick is, if you want to draw the figure well, or plants, or animals, or dragons, or whatever it is that you want to draw, you need to be able to feel them forward in 3D, but also feel intuitively their backs. And so see how I draw a very light line? This is a probing line. And then as I get more confident, I'll darken that line up. Now I don't want to go too dark since we're on the back side of that. So I could darken this up, the front side, more than the back, which is the back here, to help pull that forward to make this just a little bit darker to see. But now this line, in this line, in this line, in this line, are in the back of and coming down through like a globe. Latitude and longitude of a drawing in through there. And I'll take a little bit darker aspect of the sphere here, and you can start to see that that becomes even more of a 3D object as well. So let's pull our camera view out a little bit, and let's do a few more spheres too as well. So you can begin to take the sphere and modify that into more egg forms. Okay, so why the egg form? Well, the egg form is an essential component. For instance, if you want to draw the palm or the hand, this whole area is kind of an egg. If you want to draw a calf or oval shapes of the head, the egg form is the concept is as close to the sphere as we can get. So we'll pull out just a little bit more so you can see. And let's draw a few egg forms over here. So the shape of that egg form is like this. So we're drawing its 2D version. Okay, it's kind of like a cone. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a fatter version of the cone. And the cone is over here, right? Or not even the cone even. We can go even further. Sorry, we can go to the triangle. The cone is three-dimensional. So there's the triangle. And then, of course, we have the 3D part of that, which is now the cone, of course. And what's the cone? The bottom of it is like our cylinder with the ellipse right in through there. So now we have the cone. So we can use this form, which is a very handy tool to use when we talk about the egg form. Okay, so there's the shape of it here. And now we can start to say, okay, egg form, a little bit more eggy, like a chicken egg sitting on the tabletop, which would be hard to balance, but you get the idea. I'll sit it down in through here. And so if I threw some light over here or contouring, we could see it like this around. So I'm thinking about these 360-degree ellipses that start to tell us that this is a round form. Maybe a little bit darker on the edges. Not always. That can be changed depending on the lighting, especially if the lighting was coming in this direction. That could certainly change as well. So we have that. I'll keep on going. Practice this over and over again. Cross-contouring across a form, a rounded form, here and through here. Now I'll draw it a little bit more solidly in through here, and then we're starting to look down on it a little bit further. So these could get a little wider, like so, get a little bit narrower as they come together, like so, depending upon our point of view. And you might wind up with something that kind of looks like that in cross-contouring. So these lines, again, they emphasize the width of the form, the depth, and the dimension as they come across the form here. Now if I take this same form and I put a little light up here shining down, put a little sun symbol, and a little bit of a cast shadow down here, look at what we get. We get even more dimension. So cast shadow here, maybe a form shadow runs like so, and we'll cross contour our hatching lines in the same direction as our more graph cross contour lines, and we can start to get even more of a dimensional source. So the direction that I'm moving my hatched contour lines corresponds to the crossed contour graph, or more technical lines. We could get a lot more technical and tight. As a matter of fact, you could do sketch after sketch, tighten it down, put tracing paper over, tighten it again. Then you could put it into Photoshop or Coral Paint or wherever you want to use, and then trace back over that, put it in Illustrator, and make it so super graphic tight that it looks like a computer drew that. You know, here's another artist to look up. Look up Uccello. I think I'm spelling that right. I don't know if it's 2 L's or 1 or not, but he did drawings of chalices and other objects. He's a Middle Renaissance, Late Renaissance artist, and they were brilliant for their time, for 1500s, for their look as if he drew them from a computer. They're outstanding. So Uccello, look at his work. So I could throw some lines in this direction, like so, and so you see again this connection between the direction of the contouring, which is cross-hatched contour, from the contour lines here that gives you that rounded dimension in through here. So let's draw a couple of more egg forms. I'll sit it in this direction. So I might start out drawing the back, or the fat part of it, the buttock part of it, if you will, like a circle. And then I'll say if the direction's coming in this direction from our egg form, then I can start to put that cone, rounded kind of cone top, right, in through here. Now I'm drawing like sort of like a perfect, I wouldn't say perfect, but an egg that's not necessarily a chicken egg, but it's got that feeling of that roundness to it. And so we can say with our line work, we're coming across the back side like this. And then this turns the opposite way here. Okay, and then it kind of comes up the shaft to the top part of our egg. And so I'm always using thickness and thinness of line weight to tell a story about what we're doing with the form, where we think it's articulating or being articulated in space, okay, and what it is in space. Egg form that way, coming down in this direction. Maybe another one is tilted, and so we get this kind of egg, where a true maybe chicken egg would sit down like so. So the basics of it is that circle, right, or that sphere, the big part of it, and then you move down and the egg can come in this direction, right, and turn through. Sketch it out. Don't be afraid to correct. Feel your way through. Draw lightly. I know I'm drawing with a pen. You could do this in graphite. You could do it in Sharpie. Don't worry about erasing. Make your mistakes and show yourself what you're capable of correcting. It's really powerful. So this might sit down at its apex right in through where I'm drawing here. So I might draw my darkest line here and then taper that line off. It's like this. It's like drawing the same line, curved line. That's about the same line through here. It's a little boring, so what you could come and do is thicken that line in some areas, right? Not too thick. We don't want to get, to a line that's here, because that becomes what? That becomes a shape. So that's too thick for a line. This is probably, that might even be a little thick. It's almost in the shading. But right in through here, thick to thin, and taper it. Continue to taper that line, make it beautiful, and then back to kind of a medium, maybe it disappears. So using your line quality, which is another topic. Drawing can be so complex, but they're all interrelated, and you pick them up quickly, because when you're drawing, you're using all of your elements and your principles mostly, not always, but mostly together. But we break them down. So let's say the hot spot of the egg is right on the butt part of it. And so here's where the light sources come in this direction. Okay? And so this might be the hot spot right in through here. And so I could throw contoured lines this direction if I want. Notice how they're not straight up and down, vertical or horizontal, at an angle. That can be an exciting change to the contouring approach that you take. So they're lightest here where that highlight is, okay, and they get darker maybe right in through the rump part, and they fall away a little bit lighter. And so you can lightly draw them, let them fade out where the light is, right in through here. Maybe pick up a little bit darker as they turn away, and you get this pinstriped effect. But that tells you that they're round. Then you can cross. Let me finish this really quickly. Then you might even come up this direction a little bit. But I need to come really back over and through here to show you that. Through and through here, right? Then you can say, hey, I want to also in the same drawing emphasize this motion right across. And so this is turning and moving. That's not good. Turning in this direction. So I'll put the arrow right in through here, arrow there. And so it's turning and through and coming back in that direction. Okay? And so that gives you even more 3D. So watch this. Let's communicate that in the same drawing. So this may come across and get at its fattest part right in through here where I've got the pen. Okay, and it's moving down and across like so. And then it can turn, maybe it's going to stay fairly dark and over, and then it contours and falls back in through this direction. So I'm kind of giving some weight and direction and dimension. A little bit thicker here, a little bit lighter, medium, a little bit darker there to give variety. So we could keep going with that. Maybe I'll do here. Maybe this one's not quite as curved. It wants to get to this area, so it would start to perhaps do something like this, right? And so we get to this coming back around, kind of like almost a cylinder in through this direction. And so when you're drawing objects and forms, say if you're drawing apples and oranges and cucumbers, in rolls and buns, and you might have meat on there, maybe you have French fries, or you have steak on there, or whatever, you're going to be trying to figure out which object, which conception I want to use in my drawing. Is it a sphere, is it a cube, or is it a cylinder? And you'll base your mental concept off of that, even though you might be drawing more of what the object looks like. But somewhere in your mind, you need to have going. You need to have going the idea that what you're drawing is also can also be conceived as a very, very simple kind of concept. So I could even go this direction, or I could come back in that direction too as well. So lots of powerful things you can do with cross contouring. And so I can make this like a polar here, area and cut a hole out there if I wanted. So that's another possibility. Lots of possibilities when drawing. And so again, that's the egg form. So you start out from kind of a circle, and you say, okay, which direction from that circle do I want to go? Do I want to go up? Do I want to go this way, that way, that way? You have 360 degrees of options to go from, and say maybe I want to go back. Maybe I want to go out. Let's see if space I have with the camera this direction, so I can go here and kind of base it off maybe this arrow direction. It doesn't have to be that technical, but I just want to give you the idea, and then I can start to shape this egg in this direction, kind of like that, and you get the idea. And then you have your contouring. So if the light source maybe came up here, I could throw some shadow down on the opposite side. So the light's going to be one area, in your shadow tone, you probably know this if you have some experience, your shadow tone is going to be on its direct opposite. And we went from 2D to 3-dimensionality. Okay? All right. So that is some basic constructs of the sphere, going from the 2-dimensional, the circle. Draw that circle. Okay? Move that arm around. Move it around. Get a feel for where you want to put it. Get a feel for where you want to place it. Draw it in different sizes. Draw it in different scales. Okay? You can't draw it in different directions. Why? Because it's a shape. So take that 2D form. Practice the heck out of it. Draw it lightly. Correct it down. So if you started out drawing it like this, don't fret. Oh goodness, right? Uh-oh. No, it's okay. Come back over it. Tighten it up. In the dark. Once you get it situated, darken it in a little. Go darker, and your mistake lines won't show through. So correct your mistakes, not by obsessively erasing. That's why I wanted to do these in pen. The next one I'll probably do in ballpoint pen. I'll do the last one in Sharpie. I'd prefer you, in YouTube land you can do whatever you want, but my students for sure, I want you to get in the habit of correcting your drawings so we can see your corrections. Just see where you're learning, you're making your mistakes, and you're growing. So if you can do that in YouTube land, hey, go for it. And then turn these into spheres, 3D. Throw light on them if you want, like this one, or throw cross contour globe lines, okay, if you will, and make them into the beautiful 3D conceptions that they are, okay? So when you're drawing those circles, draw lightly. Make sure you're trying to make all those pie charts equal. All right? Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to go on to the idea of the cube, the square to the cube and to the rectangular cube. Don't be thrown off by the rectangular cylinder. Okay? Let's move on to that form, and now we'll draw those with a ballpoint pen. Okay, let's look at the cube, the old-fashioned cube, the stalwart of planar directions, and a really great measure of where a form is in space, where it's going, how it's formed. The cube, fantastic form, one of my favorite forms to use, even more so than the cylinder and the sphere. So I'm drawing with a ballpoint pen, and I may throw in some ruler usage with the triangle here. I love using the triangle. Why? Because it's a hard edge like a ruler, it's light, and then whoops, you can also see through it, which I like to, so you know where your drawing is. All right, so we have now the cube, okay, and again, it's based off of the very dimensional, or excuse me, lack of dimension, the 2D of the square, okay? And the square, or in this case, the rectangular square, it means it's, you know, it's not, all sides aren't equal, is, or kind of goes like so. You know this. I'm going to start sketching this out. One thing to start getting in the habit of is start lightly sketching out your line where you want it, if you can. Okay, you can do a hardcore kind of contour too. That works too if you want. And I get a line going, and then I tighten and darken that line up. So I got a probing line, right? And I'll probe here, rectangular, square, squarish form, really just a rectangle. And so I'll probe it out, and then I'll get darker with it. Then you could come over, and if you want, take your hard edge, okay, and boom, clean that up if you want. Okay, drawing squares. I mean, you did this in grade school, unless you're in grade school now and you're watching, which that would be a great thing. And so you're tightening up those lines. And so the trick for now, and really just quickly now, is that these are 90-degree angles, okay, in that they're nice and perpendicular. Okay, they're nice and perpendicular. They make that 90-degree angle there and in there. That doesn't always have to be the case, but you get that. And so quickly, we're basing cubes off of this very simple two-dimensional concept. Okay? And then we can start to get, I think, a lot more jazzy with this. So we can start out, let's sketch out some more cubes here. And we can start to say, okay, we've got this against that. Okay, nice and light sketch. Don't worry about making a mistake. If your line's out here, your line's over here are kind of whoppy-jawed, go back and correct it. I'm keeping a very light touch with my pen. I'm holding it very lightly. I'm holding it in a writing style like I did the sphere lecture. Very lightly, and then when I have a good feel for where it's forming, then I get a little bit and draw a little bit darker. Then we can come across and say, okay, I can use my ruled line. What I'd prefer you to do, all students out there, is to not sketch directly with the ruler. Okay, like so. Here, freehand this out. Learn to sketch freehand. Then later on you can kind of come back and do this if you want, but freehand it. Get the experience. Please don't shortcut yourself. Be kind to yourself, meaning that take the high road, take the more difficult road. Learn how to what you call freehand sketch from now on. You'll be glad you did. So let's turn this square into a cube, and we're going to look as if we're looking on top of it. Okay, we're above it. Watch this. And so I've got a line coming here. I've got a line coming here. Now I'm not really talking about perspective in this lesson, although I'm using it. I don't want to talk about it yet because it's its own little, not little, it's its own beefy discussion topic. And so I'm bringing this line over, which is parallel to this line, right, into this line. You see that? These are the exact same, not necessarily length, these are, but this necessarily isn't, but they're the same horizontality. These lines here of the cube are your depth lines. That means where you're going back in space. That gives you not depth, but depth, deep dimensionality, deepness, or what's another word we've been using? 3D. Now the vertical here, see I'm bringing this down. Now if I drew it over here, that's not correct. It's got to be vertical. So this line equals this line in terms of its angle, which also equals this line. See how that lines up nicely? Right to that base of the cube, running through here. And then we'll just kind of tighten and connect them a little bit. Let it be sketchy, but let it be structurally solid. Now, so we have now a 3D cube, right? You see that. But let's talk about something else. This now becomes what? This becomes the front plane of the box or the cube of the form. The form, right? So this becomes the 3D aspect or the element. Also now, this becomes the what? The left side. This becomes the left. And this has a 3D aspect. It's moving in this direction. Can you feel it going back in space? Can you feel it? Ask yourself, hey, can I feel it? Can I feel this going back, back, back in that direction? Okay? That's so very important. Then can you feel the top? Look how much more complex this form is than the shape here. What a big difference in reality of your drawing practice. So we can come down with these contours, which tells us a story about its length, not its width. If we wanted width, we would go in this direction, like a Rubik's Cube. Look at that, see? And now let's tell a story about the top. So we can connect where they touch here. Okay, and here. And clean these up just a little bit. And they move off now in depth and dimension. They create our top. They are going back to a defined point in space to give us that 3D look. Look at that. Now we can come down here, darken this line a little bit because it's sitting down on our imaginary table here and here. Then we could put a little shading. And so I'll do a little hatch shading here. And also at the top. And what does that give us? That gives us a truer now measure, truer picture of dimensionality with the cube. So let's go a little bit further and let's change our points of view with the cube. So let's branch out in these directions, okay? And let's see cubes, rectangular boxes in different forms without so much of talking about perspective, okay? We know it's there. We know perspective is there. We're going to get into that meaty topic with several different lessons. 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, multiple point use, and have all kinds of different lectures and kind of finished practice drawings from that. So let's take another box form. So let's come up here a little bit and let's take another box, and I'll make this one more horizontal, kind of rectangular box form. Here and here. And so maybe I want it moving the opposite of this box over here. So I could say, okay, let's look as if we're below it, looking down on it. So I can start to project my side planes of my box in this direction, okay? They're the depth lines. They are not necessarily, never really the same angle. Okay, I know you might have learned to draw cubes somehow like that. They're really not. They may look it, but they're different because they're in perspective. So we'll cut this box off here, bring my vertical over, same. This is the same angle as here. And then the horizontal part, here to here to here, is also the same angle. So the horizontals are equal to one another, and the verticals are equal to one another in this case. Then we could throw some contour, cross contour across these. Okay. We could throw it in this direction if you want. Bring the length of this. We could go in two different directions. I'm going to go in this direction. Some people might go a horizontal. We've already got that. Watch this. Let's go in this direction to emphasize that plane, what moving back in space that way. So we're emphasizing that movement to and from us, to and fro. You've got to be able to think in drawing, designing, if you want to be a product designer or entertainment designer or creature designer, concept artist, fine artist, illustrator. You've got to be able to think about all these concepts in your mind. It seems overwhelming, but you kind of take it on naturally. You will take it on naturally. All right, so let's draw another box here. So nice and loose. Make sure that the top and bottom are equal to one another in terms of their horizontality, and the verticals are equal to one another in terms of their verticality, and we'll tighten them up a little bit. You can do like that if you want. Boom, boom, tighten them up. All right, so let's take on a view. We'll come back in this direction. And so I'll say, okay, let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go in this direction. This will be pulled at more of an angle than that one. This will be pulled downward more than this one, like so. And I know you're thinking, well, how does he know that perspective? I'll get there, okay? I know you might be frustrated a little bit by that, but this is more basic than perspective. We'll get there, I promise. I want you to intuitively feel it out, okay? So we have that. Now I'm just going to throw some shading on this one. And I'll throw my shading. There's another trick I'll show as I'm throwing my shading. I'll throw my shading in the direction of the angles that are coming down. You don't want to do it the opposite way. You could, but that breaks up the effect of the flow. And then I'll also abut my ruler against that edge I want to keep it nice and tight. And see how fast you can go? You can be loose and sketchy. See it hit that edge? And look at that. Keeps that edge clean. You have to watch this side. And then for this one, I'll emphasize the movement, the L-shaped movement this way, right? Okay, so I'll come and I'll cross contour hatching into the edge. But here I'll go a little bit darker and darker where they come together even. And boom, I've got another plane going here of my box. Okay, so we were drawing boxes, and they're one-point boxes. What does that mean? Well, that means that this front plane of our box is always parallel to us. It looks very flat. We're going to get out of that in a moment. But the one thing I want to show you too, as we move on down in this direction, is that boxes, cubes are not always, probably more so often than not just standing straight up. What about if they're tilted? Well, remember our right angle, our 90 degrees, we want to keep that. But we want to tilt the box. So we want to start doing this. Come back over here and see this. We want to start doing this where they're tilted, but they're still at that right angle of 90 degrees, right? That's a tilted square. It's taken off the verticality and the true horizontality here and here, and now it's at a diagonal. So let's do that. Let's start maybe with, I'm just going to sketch it out. Sketch it out here. And sketch it out here, right? 90 degrees, right in through there. And then we'll come back over here, 90 degrees. And back over here, right? 90 degrees. 90 degrees in all angles. And if you want to tighten it up with your ruler, go boom, there, boom, there, there. Come back and kind of connect them. You can keep it sketchy, but see how it tightens it up a little bit? And now we can go in several different directions. If you wanted to show this plane and this plane, we would come up this way. If we wanted to show this plane and this plane, we could come out this way. If we wanted to show this plane and this one, we could come out there. Okay? What we can't show is every plane in every direction. You're really going to get, most of the time, 2 or 3 planes going. Okay? I've shown you mostly 3 here. Okay, let me quickly show you 2, so make sure that you're like, well, wait a minute, how come it's not 3? Well, watch this. So if we show this against that, how many planes do we see? Here's our table we're sitting on. I'll shade it a little bit. We only see 2, the front plane, right, and then the side plane to the left. So that's only 2. So you're going to see only 2 or 3. All right, so let's pull back our planes in this direction. Let's go back in this direction. So I could say, okay, I'll lightly sketch. I want this one to go that way. Now, if I come in this direction, that's only going to show me 2. So I've got to come out here a little bit to take this one into account there, like so. Okay. So I'm going to lightly sketch that out, and then I'm going to say, let's come back and clean it up. Now I can say, in terms of my parallelness, this is parallel to that. That's parallel to that. This now is parallel to this back line here. And There's my depth line here. My plane changed there. And now this I'll bring down. You don't want to draw out. The tendency sometimes is to draw fatter here. Look how that's wappy-jawed, okay? Meaning it's distended. It's not correct. And so now I want to bring that line down. It's not true vertical. It's on an angle right to there. They're parallel. So if I clean that up, look at that. And so we get a very now slight view of our box on this left side. Do you see that? So we've got this moving in this direction. Then it changes planes right here where that strong line is. And what does it do? It moves back in this direction. Okay, so I'll put an arrow this way. As we go that way. And then now this one moves, it turns here, it turns and moves back in that direction. Goes here, and then as it hits this line, it turns and it moves and it goes back in that direction. Here, 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 and there. And so you get that change right there. And so that's why artists like to use boxy forms when drawing complex objects, because it tells you a very specific story of when the light changes or the plane changes. And I threw a little contour line on there just to give it a little bit of shadow dimension. Throw this across like that. And you get the idea of that box. So now we have a tilted box. So if this was sitting down on a table, like so, then you would see how tilted it would be from another box like this one up above it. So we get that wonderful kind of tilted, complex kind of construction. Okay, so let's do one more. I'll start to go quickly through here. Now that won't be tilted. Why? Because that's a straight line. So let's do another tilted one. Let's take off that, and we'll come back here, and we'll come down this direction. Okay, and over. We'll tighten that. Tighten this up a little bit. Boom, boom. This can go quicker once you start to get the feel of it. And then I'll bring now the angles back in this direction, the opposite of that here. If I only wanted two planes, I would bring, let's just do a two-plane one. How about that? I would bring it this way, okay? And so they would disappear where they, in a sense, where they meet, okay? That's called one-point perspective. We'll get to that. Now, I'll arbitrarily say that's where I want my box plane, my right plane to end, and I'll tighten up this line. I'll tighten up that line here and here. I'll emphasize some contour line. So I'll come across the form widthwise here to here. And then I'll start to move down where they change planes, and I'm hitting right for that dot every time. Okay? Right there. So that tells you, look at that dimension that I start to get with the box form. And now we get two planes, right? And we've seen mostly three planes. We've seen three planes there, two there. 0 planes, right? Why? Because we have a shape, and then 3 planes here as well. All right, let's move on a little bit. Of course, this is tilted. This is, again, kind of the same tilt, just a different... Notice our viewpoint's different. Why? Because we see where our viewpoint's in here with these two boxes, because we're seeing the inside of the right side, even because the boxes push over to the left, and we're seeing the inside of this plane on the left side. Why? Because the box is pushed over to the right. So point of view, I'll just put POV up here. Hopefully you can see it. Let me put it down a little bit lower. Point of view, there we go, is important, and we'll get into that even further because it tells you where your viewpoint, your relationship of your eye level is to the form itself, and what what clear planes that you're going to be seeing into the future. And I'll put a little shading on this plane here. So let's go on now to some 2-point forms. And the big difference here as we move over is that the 2-point box is got the movement now of depth and dimension now in 2 different directions, meaning that we see that corner of our box, not the front plane anymore, but this front corner first. I always kind of draw that front corner first, but I don't necessarily have to. I could come over here and do this if I wanted, right? I could do that. I could actually draw it last here and to there, and then draw it. So I don't want you to think that it's so procedurally driven that it's got to be a step-by-step. Remember that what I said earlier, be careful of people who say how to draw this or how to draw that. There are many different ways, and I'm giving you constructive methodologies to help you figure out through your own learning and your own self-learning and pacing that there are many different methodologies. Be careful of style of an artist. Find out the construction of the artist. The intent, the idea is more so than the style. All right, so let's finish out the bottom, which moves back in space this way. So these aren't parallel, but they're in a depth projection of space and movement. This is not parallel. These are, the verticals are now true vertical still. That changes for now in this drawing. See how they're true vertical. I'll tighten them up so you can see that. So they are truly parallel to one another. There and also there. They are parallel to one another. Then we could throw on a little shading. I can do this kind of a cross. Show that as a cross contour and give it even more dimension. It's kind of a diagonal there. And if the light source is coming more in this direction, I can give this side a little bit more of a shading tonality. I can vary that. Maybe there's reflected light, so I can leave a little bit open, and I can get darker down towards the ending corners in there if I want. That gives it an understanding of kind of light skipping across the surface. And this can be the lightest side. I'll put just a little bit of value through here. Notice we have 1, 2, 3 planes. We have 1, 2, 3 step, what I also call shading. A lighter side, 1, maybe a medium side, 2, and then a heavier side, 3. I need to go maybe a little bit darker to illustrate that point a little more cleanly. So I'll go back and give this more contouring, shading, so you can see this. So 1, 2, 3 step shading. 1, 2, 3 planes. 1, 2, 3. All right, so now look at the difference between the aspect, our drawing aspect of this view of the cube against this view of the cube. What's the difference? The difference is a front plane view, parallel to us. All sides are parallel. 2 are parallel. The verticals are parallel. The horizontals are parallel. And here we have change of plane dimension here. Boom. And then once we hit this surface, stops, and then it wants to go back in space that way. Same thing here. It wants to go up or down depending upon your viewpoint, and then it stops and says, come back this way. Okay, and it keeps wanting, and then if it goes underneath, it comes back and it goes up and over and goes back vertical again, but on the back side. Okay, so what that looks like in its six-sidedness is this, if we could see through it. Okay, stay with me. So I'll draw it quick here, as if we don't see through it here and here, correct? But then we have this back side, so I'll try to draw it even lighter here to there. Right, here's where it connects right there, and then it comes down through there. So now we have a six-sided cube. So don't get confused by these little triangular stars. I want you to see this dimension. This is the left plane. Here, I'll darken it in so you can see it. Left plane, right plane, and then bottom plane here. Do there. Okay, and then you see this back side. So the true top, we can't, so if we see through this, okay, there's our left plane. Our right plane, I'll give the direction of the flow with the shading. And then our bottom plane here. So where's our true top? Our true top, we're having to see through it, you see here. Okay, use your X-ray vision, Wonder Woman, whoever. And so we see the top. Here's the top way up there underneath, looking through. Here's your bottom we can see clearly. But what about this right plane? On the back side, we have to see through it. It's over there. Same thing with this left plane. It's back over there. So looking at it from its true six-sided, three-dimensional self. So again, you have to take a very true measure of what's going on in its complete three-dimensional aspect. Let's do that again. Let's take a little bit more simple view. Let's take a cube now where we're looking on top of it. A little bit more simple aspect. And let me see if I can illustrate for you this concept better. It's kind of like this, but we're going to be looking at the top of it. And so, again, remember when I said I drew the front plane? Not always. Let me draw the top first. You can draw it from many different aspects. Sketch this out. Draw, make your mistakes, draw a whole lot, sketch constantly, and this will pay off for you no matter how you want to use drawing. So let's bring down our verticals here. Vertical here, nice and light and loose. Notice sometimes I'll make one line, I'll make another line kind of next to it, and bring those lines together. And then let's bring our bottom depth this way, moving in this direction, and let's bring our left depth. Now remember, we're going back in space, so it can't be straight across. So I can't make that line. I can't do that. That's a no-no. It's got to be there. There we go. Let's tighten this up a little bit. Here and here. I'm going to change this angle up a little bit. Why? Instinct tells me that's wasn't quite accurate. So we'll tighten this up. Okay. So now we're going to draw the inside. We're going to draw the guts of the cube. Now what we're really doing is saying that it's going to be truly transparent. It's as if it's made out of glass. Okay. Or transparent. I'll just put transparent there so we'll see that. How do we do that? Oh, let's take this angle. This is my guide. Is this going back in space without getting too perspective technical? There's my guide right there. So now I can say, okay, here's my guide here. It feels pretty good. They almost would feel parallel. Might be a little bit more flat since it's got a longer way to go. Now we can start to bring down, a true vertical. I don't have to think as hard. I just have to know that's a true vertical. And where that meets, it lines up right there where those two lines technically meet. And then I can say, well, this is kind of nice. That means that all I have to do is line up this point to that point. But what I'm really saying is that this whole movement feels like it's going back in that direction, correct? There's my little arrow there. Always like to draw arrows that tell students, hey, that's going in that direction. So then let's clean this up a little bit. You always want to keep your back lines lighter. Why? Because they're distant. So if I drew these two lines, which one is a lighter line? If I draw this line freehand, which one can you see better? Which one comes forward and which one recedes? Even though they're on the same plane, the darker, thicker lines. So darker, thicker lines come forward, lighter, thinner lines recede in space. So watch this, here, here, here. Now I'm using size dimension, but also thickness relationships. Hopefully you can see that to make that fade away. Okay. So let's strengthen up, tighten up these lines here to here. Don't worry about that line there. That's okay. Where it's just a sketch. I'm correcting. Up your sketch here to here. Here to there. There we go. Okay, there to there. All right, so now we can see, look how clean and clear we can see that. Let's analyze our planes now. So we can see our top really cleanly, right? Going back in space here. So we can see that. We can see our plane, our left plane, moving back in space this way, right? There's our contouring there, right? And then we can see our right plane, forward right plane, right? We can see going back in space this way. Pretty clean, pretty clear. And now to see the bottom, since our viewpoint, our eye level is higher, we're looking down, we see the bottom here. But through, because it's made now of transparency and glass. If it was opaque, like these, we wouldn't be able to see it. So there's the bottom, right in through here. Here's the left side of our box, of the back plane, right? And here's the right back, right in through here. So that gives you 6 sides. Top, bottom, left, and right, and back, left, back, right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Get in the habit, if you can, of starting to do that too as well, and it will truly kind of pay off for you. I still feel like if I was going to truly correct this cube, I would bring this up even a little higher, right in through there, and this over a little bit here. And then you could come back and give this a little bit of shading to take the bite off that. Don't worry about your incorrections. Always correct. It's more important to catch them. There we go. All right. So let's do a couple more. I'll go through this even more quickly. And we'll move on. Just a different shaped box. Sketching now quicker. I always like to vary my sizes to give it more interest and dimension here and here. This pulls back like so. And let's draw the back dimension. Bring that vertical up to here. And we'll connect that over. Let it be loose, let it be sketchy. Actually better. Draw like a box tower this way maybe. Let's go ahead and see the bottom of it here. There. We'll bring this over. Through down there. In this direction. I can come back and tighten this up. Look how much of the bottom that we see in this viewpoint. Here and here. There. To there. On over to there. Through down. Go a little bit lower. Sketching, you get an approximation. With a strong ruled line, you get much more definitive. So you have to correct that. And let's get the inside now. Let's bring this over to there. Let's bring this down to here. Looking at the building blocks of form, the cube. One of my favorites because it tells us so much about the true direction of planes and light. Although too much boxing and things don't look natural or real, so they have their limitations. This is sitting down, so I'll make that a little darker. I can make it, bring that out a little bit further, put that down a little bit. I could put some shadow down on the bottom of it through there. Could bring a little shadow tone through here.
do one more in through here. Let's see. Maybe I'll draw some depth first, just to change the direction dimension here. And so, by the way, you draw planes in different shapes. Like if we wanted to make this an L shape, how would we do that? Well, okay, we could start to bring this down, like so. And I could bring this out here, okay, like so. Start bringing this over. And so, letter forms, boxy forms, they're all kind of the same. They just get a little bit more complex. Bring that vertical there, and then we have more shape. And so you want to start to feel this moving this direction, right? And then this comes downward, okay, like so. Then you want to feel this moving back in the same direction as this. So we're feeling this side down, and down and over to get us to there, correct? And so that's the whole point, is to start to feel those planes and angles. Okay, so that's the cube. Now I want to go on to our last form, which is a fun form, which is the cylinder. Let's look at the cylinder now. So this is an exciting, another exciting aspect to our drawing, that you'll use this form in a lot of different ways. You'll use it for arms. You'll use it for forearms, for legs, for trees, for figures, for all kinds of inventions you want to draw, both from imagination, from reality, and using a little bit of both, and also photography as well. So now I'm going to use the Sharpie, and again, you can't erase, so I think that's a good thing, and I've got my hard edge too as well. So let's take a look at a little bit of, we'll start over here with the cylinder. And let's take a look at why it's so important. So we start out with the cylinder. Its antecedent is the rectangular, or just the rectangle, really. Okay, so at 90 degrees here. And you can use that in many different kind of planar directions, very flat shaped, like so, okay? And then we can say, okay, we can start to put this in a little bit more fun dimension and perspective, and we can start to use that rectangle here, and that can be fun. So it can be a tilt, and we can use the plane to do this, right? We can come out, okay, in this direction, like so. So it's moving in this direction. And we can do that, so it even gets even more fun. And we can say, all right, so maybe I'll draw the front tip first. We can pull that back this way, and we can pull that back this way, and we've got that. And maybe I'll tighten that up just a little bit so you can see it here. You can see that there. In through here, vertical there. And, well, not quite a vertical. We'll make it tilted as well. And so we get this direction. We know it's coming in this direction, the rectangle. It also has a vector direction that way. So we get here, you see that, and you also get it here as well. Now we can make cubes out of that. We've done that already, but now we want to explore also the concept of, so we have the cylinder. Make sure you can see, I can see that rectangle, the cylinder, and then now the ellipse. And so that gives us our next added dimension to our drawing practice. The ellipse is a disc, okay? It's a disc, and it's essentially a circle that is starting to be looked at not from its true flat perspective. So if we drew a circle here, okay, and we said, all right, here's our circle, our nice sketched out circle. All sides are equal. That's what we would see if we were looking at a can, or we were looking at a piece of tape, or I've got this little jar. Here's a cylinder, right? And we're looking at it straight on. Probably see it where it's almost a true
true circle, looking at it straight on. But if we start to tilt it and tilt it back, we start to see it as a series of different ellipses. Same thing with the bottom, true flat. So its true flatness of the disc ellipse would look like this, right? It wouldn't have any dimension at all. It almost looked like a line. And the more that we turn the ellipse or the disc towards the circle, it starts to get more oval-like, okay? Like that, until we get back to the flat. So that circle is flat. This is, my friends out there in drawing land, this is an ellipse right there. It's not a true circle. Same thing with all those other ellipses. Now the point is to start to connect these together to make that very sexy, cool cylinder form. I don't know about sexy, but you get the idea. And so now we can take all this information and say, okay, let's draw and let's make some cylinders. And so a cylinder is a series of discs, ellipses, that when stacked together, no matter how their thickness, they become a cylinder. So a cylinder is a series of stacked ellipses that, when put together, become a cylinder. Ellipses stacked together. So if I drew that, a little bit more dimension, this curve coming across, maybe I'll put a little bit of cast shadow to take the bite of that heavy line out of the way. And through there and over, we get that feeling. Now, the next thing is to forget about the stacked ellipses, okay, and just draw the cylinder. So let's take now an ellipse, fairly flat ellipse. So the flatter they are, okay, the closer they are to our true eye level, where they disappear. The rounder, full rounder they are, the closer they are looking straight down on. So we're pretty flat over here. So let's take and make a cylinder. Bring down our verticals, true vertical, 90 degrees, right? Like over here. And sometimes what I like to do is teach my students is, and this takes a lighter touch with a Sharpie, is to bring a straight line across, because you know that the curve's not going to be. So you have something to gauge off of it. Then I bring my ellipse over, start to sketch it out, and then darken it and tighten it up a little bit. And I could take my ruler if I want here and here. Okay, tighten those up. Something I want to talk about now as we look down the barrel of an ellipse through here is that the further ellipse, okay, the ellipse that's further away from us, this bottom curve is more curved than the top. Why? It's further away, so it's going to be flatter and get closer to the circle. So see how this curve is got more of a curve than that one, okay? That bottom curve. That's very, very important. Now we could come with some cross contour lines, moving in this direction or back across or straight across. Many different ways to do that. And so you could cross contour vertical, but I think a truer measure of its nature roundness, okay, which it corresponds to the sphere. So if we came straight across flat, then all of a sudden we would hit this, and look, we would come around, right? Round. We'd come around, hit, come around, hit, come around even further, and come around even further. So that's where you get the idea of the stacked ellipse, which I think is really important. So these are straight here, and then all of a sudden they get curved here, and then they go back to being a straight kind of form. So ellipses and rectangles, and we start to get the cylinder. And cylinders come in many different directions. So this is, when I show the full disc, that means I'm looking down on, or I call that
the open position. So I call that open. We're seeing through as if the cylinder were glass, and so I call this area the closed position. Open and closed. What if we reversed it? What would that say? Well, what that would say was the can is above us. So let's draw an ellipse here, curve, and then let's put our verticals downward for now, over here. So we've got that. Then I'm going to draw my little line in through here. Now we're going to keep this open. Why? Because we're going to be looking up to the cylinder. Up to. Right in through there. So we've got a darker, thicker line in through here. Now, I like to, when I draw my cylinders, I like to give the plane change illustration at an angle, just to play off of that sliced kind of calling, like we took a knife and we cut the sausage off a little bit like that. And so what's happening is we have a straight coming through here, and then we get the arch, the curve, right? And then we come back over. So we have the curve in through here. And yep, you guessed it, since this is further away, since our viewpoint's here, this actually could be a little rounder in through here. So plus, right, even though this is closed, this is a more curved ellipse here than this one, even though that one's open. So the idea of your eye position is very important, or your point of view, or where we're seeing it from. Here we're from below, right? Here we're from above, where you see the open and closed. Now let's take a couple of aspects like this. We've already taken this vertical cylinder. Let's take the, what I'll say, the cans laying down approach. You know, you could take this idea of drawing the cylinder, and you could say, okay, I'm going to draw it as a rectangle first. Totally. Draw your rectangle out first, like that. Okay, sketch your rectangle out. Then you got to figure which side are we seeing more of. I'm going to say that we're seeing this area more open, just slightly, in this area more closed. Okay. That means this side's going to be like this, it's closed. So there's my ellipse, right, like that. But the trick here with this one, since it's straight on, the ellipse is, I'm going to keep this one slightly open, but there won't be any more plus or minus curve. Why? Because we're really seeing it from about the same vantage point, even though I'm going to open this one up slightly. So sometimes I'll start these curves here. This straight line tells me where the true center is, and I can curve slightly here. You just want your curve just to touch on the edge. Curve in through here. You never want it to end straight like that. You never want your cylinders to end kind of end with an angle, because they don't. Take a look at a can, a jar, whatever you have, and you'll find this. So I'll bring this over like so, and then let's close our ends end to end here tighter. I'm going to make this line a little darker and heavier than the top. Why? Because it's sitting down here. So I'll even put a little darker line, maybe make a little shadow here like so, and then we'll throw a little shadow tone like that. Then I'm going to put a little line here for a form shadow, which means that the light's coming from out here shining down on. I'm just going to put an arrow. It's hard to show you that and draw it with an arrow like that. There's our light source. Okay. That means that we could get a cross contour like so. I'll vary these. Okay, cross contour. We could cross contour downwards. Cross contour downwards, and so like that. And now we'll make this kind of a form shadow, and I'll bring this over like so. And we'll bring this through here a little bit, and then I can cross corner. I can put a little dot right there. That tells me kind of like the center of that ellipse. I'll draw it, flip this way, and it tells me that my little crosshair lines do that. And there's where my true center is. And so I could say, okay, this is moving in that direction if I want. Because really, we can be moving with a true circle, right? Here, coming through. There, we can be moving in this direction or this direction, which gives us our all pies are equal, all pie slices are equal, but that doesn't say everything. True center, we could be moving in this direction of a plane change or that direction of a plane change. That doesn't say everything. We could be moving in this direction. We could be moving in that direction. You get the idea. This could go on until I get a dark circle with hundreds of lines moving in any different direction. I like to give this movement because it tells us a different story from true verticality. I think that's pretty important as well. Then I come across and maybe put a little bit of receding shadowing through there. All right, so let's move on now to something a little bit more complex and I think more fun to look at with the cylinder, and it's these kinds of plane reactions where they're coming towards and moving back. Just like we did with the cube, the 1 point, 2 point cubes in our little cube section, we can start to do the same thing with the cylinder. Now, I can draw them. I can do this and say, do what I do, and draw it like this, and you draw it like that, and you put your ellipse over through here, and you really wouldn't know how I figured all that out. So it really wouldn't be that fair now, would it? I don't think. So let's talk a little bit, slow it down a little bit, and show you how I got that cylinder to turn down on its side. This line's pretty telling, okay? And I'll show you why. There's your rectangle right there. So let's go over here a little bit, and you can start out with a rectangular kind of form. So we'll tilt this cylinder, if that's even possible, this way, and we'll move it out this direction. We'll freehand it first, move it out this direction, and then we'll clean it up this way. So this has a depth, a plane dimension like a box, rectangle. Okay, there we go. So it's moving back this way and also out towards us this way, right? So I can take that and then I can put a little vertical line in this true center, which is here if I want, and say, okay, here's the start of my ellipse. Here's the height. It moves down. Look at that, I'm curving over. Nice rounded curve, more open here than it would be in the back. We're seeing more of its dimension. So if I continue on, I've got to have a light touch kind of right in through there, right? You see that? So same thing now coming over here. We'll keep it just slightly, perceptually a little flatter. We'll open this through. Move my arm, keep that nice and light. And then we'll tighten up our cylinder here, tighten up our cylinder there. And so we start to move our cylinder out, right, in this direction. And so we started with that plane of a rectangle. You get so good at it, you don't need it anymore, but it's when you need it that you use it, and don't be afraid to use it. So I can move up, and there's the true vertical there of the center, back and forth. So we're taking a measure of using the cube in some respects to help us with our cylinder positions. Let's do some more. Let's do one going in this direction. Okay, so we can sketch out our rectangle first. We can make it a little bit longer if we want. Through here. Now let's sketch it just freehand. Okay, back curve. Like so. Correct it up as you need. Sometimes I'll start here and get a feel for it. I'll kind of sketch my way through it. Feel the width of it. Okay, and then slicing that plane across, I can start to do this. I can bring this over, bring this down a little bit. And so now we have and I can shade it this way to make it feel cut like a sausage being cut. and you get that three-dimensional effect. And all of this is doing two things. It's moving in this direction, the cylinder, right? But it's also cross-contouring. What do we get? We get this too as well. That turn across is so important. Following that form here and around the form as it disappears here and then around as it comes back in and over is very, very important. So if I put a little shadow on it, we might put a little cast shadow here, move it down in this direction where it touches would be about right here. And then this could form a cast shadow, of course, and along with the form shadow, maybe of about right in through there. And then I'll curve this over as well, like so. Okay. All right, so the light, of course, hit higher, about right in through. Running through there, kind of a highlight line. Let's do a few more. Now I'm going to change my holding of the pencil kind of to the palm method. And what if we did a cylinder that was almost coming at us, but slightly going downward like so. Well, okay, the closer a cylinder gets to coming at us, it's almost true round. Maybe the back would be. And if it's coming down, it might start to widen out a little bit. Okay, like so. And I might bring my straight line across. Here's my rectangle. And bringing this up, look at the overlap we'll get through here. Okay. These might be coming almost straight on. And then we'll say, here's our bottom. All pies are equal, roughly, right in through here. Okay. So we've got that. So that's moving slightly down. How do we know that? It's because we see this top plane moving in this direction, like so. Here's our true center. Okay, we could slice it off like that. We could actually shade it at a slight angle. It gives it a little variety. A little darker maybe in the edge just to give it effect. Through here. You can make it look kind of like light skipping across it, or maybe like sort of like steel, as much as we can get for now. Then I could take my edge and tighten my edge up here, here to here. And then we've got a very foreshortened cylinder almost coming at us, but slightly down. If it was truly coming at us, I mean, it was going to hit, or we were looking straight out, and it was going to hit our head, it would look like this. What does that look like to you? Looks like the circle. Truly flat, coming right at you, like it was somebody's fist. You know, I could take this, and we could give a circle, and then we could put knuckles on it, thumb over through here, right? And then somebody would be coming to hit us. We don't want that, but you get the idea. I want you to get the idea. 4 fingers, there's the pinky, there's the thumb, knuckles coming back. And that's a hand coming right at us. So the more you understand about perspective and about cylinders, the more you can draw that hand more believable. What if we were drawing a cylinder where it was coming towards us but slightly up, and maybe a little bit to it at an angle? So I could do this. I might gesture out the direction here. Say I want to do that, but I want it to be pretty round. So here's the back cylinder here. Then I might bring up, depending on how wide I bring it up, that might tell me how close it's coming to me, or how much I'm looking down on it. Here's my rectangle here, right? Here's the rectangle. Here's the center. I can find that, so I can say, look how wide we are here. Look how wide we are here, coming back over in this direction. So we're moving that cylinder here and over. And now we have a cylinder that's coming towards us, but slightly tilted away, so it wouldn't actually hit us. This would hit us. This is coming directly at us, like, uh-oh, look out. Okay, there's the arrow doing that. That's coming right at you. This one's coming and going slightly up, sort of towards us or away if you want, I suppose that way, and kind of right at us. So I have to be careful there. And then we can take our ruler, tighten this up a little bit. We could give this a downward looking expression. And then we can slice this coming across. We can use that line like so. And we get the cylinder in the direction that we want. And here's like the center of that coming across. Okay, so I'll do maybe a few more over here to get the idea. And so I like to show my students. I have another video out of basic sketching forms where you put all this together, but you start to give them curves like noodles. Closed position, bring my verticals, and there now are my length of my ellipse in a curved position. Here's the curved rectangle, and here's the open position, like so. And it starts to help you figure out arms and legs even further. So we have that. Okay. And I could do something where this is closed here, and this is open. Here's my rectangle closed in this position, and then we have the open quality of the cylinder there as well. So these are a little bit more dynamic and more active, and these are more static but very accurate to the concept of the basics of the cylinder. Okay, all right, so there you go. So we talked about today the cube, the sphere, and the cylinder, their applications, and hopefully you can start to see their importance into the context of drawing, why we have them, why they're available, and they are tools for you to use, to explore and experiment with no matter what type of art or what type of profession you're going in that's visually oriented. I could see you using this in really every single profession. So keep that in mind. All right, so I hope you got something out of it. And if you have any questions, feedback, email me. A few of you do that. I love that. Keep that up. Keep on practicing. Put a little cachet on. And that's the whole thing, is to excuse me, practice very diligently these aspects. You know, it takes time. Drawing happens slowly, but you get better with doing. It takes time over time, and you will see the improvement. Okay? All right. See you next time. Take care.